So welcome to our Gilfix Law webinar. I am Mark Gilfix. I'll be leading you through a meaningful talk. This is going to be an especially meaningful one to me. What is the subject? Estate planning after a serious diagnosis. I'm going to tell my personal story, something I haven't really shared publicly, and what you need to know, because I want to tell you what I've been through, because I think it's meaningful. And I think many of you can relate to what it's like to go through a serious diagnosis. And very importantly, I'm going to tell you the legal steps you need to take and how you can be prepared when you face this, because it's not if, it's when. It's pretty much every family in America. So many of our clients have been through this. And that's my mission here today, is to help you through that. As I said, this serious illness faces virtually every family in America, or every family in America faces serious illness. And it can be so overwhelming when you face that diagnosis, when you get that phone call or that email or that doctor's meeting. Many of you out there can probably already relate to this. And it makes your estate planning even more important. So much of what we do is planning for the future, planning for the worst case scenario, planning for our demise. When you face a serious medical issue, you're no longer planning for some future thing that might happen. It is happening. So what do you need to do? How can you be prepared? How can you make sure that your family is covered, that you're covered, that you have the right legal documents in place? Our firm, Gilfix La Poll, has helped thousands of families through this. I have helped so many clients. I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten when one of my clients says, "Hey, I just got a call that changed my life. I was just diagnosed with cancer or a serious heart issue, or dementia." It can be anything, but it's personal to me. So I'm going to take a minute just to tell my story, or a few minutes, to tell a pretty incredible story and some things that I've been through in the last few years. And then I'm going to get to the legal guidance that I know you're also here for. So bear with me as I share something that's very meaningful to me. And again, this is something I really haven't shared publicly, really until today. And I'm starting to share my story. So I want to share my recent medical journey and 3 messages that profoundly shaped my life. And I'll link that to what I do as an estate planner. And I am an estate planner. I'm an estate planning specialist. I'm a lawyer. I also consider myself kind of a counselor. I help many families through really tough situations. I help them through illness, through the passing of a loved one, or just planning ahead when they have a new family member, a new baby. I help families through really tough situations. But I never imagined that I would be going through my own incredibly challenging journey. But that's exactly what happened. And I want to share the 3 messages that really shaped my life over the last few years in really meaningful ways. This is a photo of me, sort of a fun one. This is me surfing. This is in Fiji. This is late 2018. I just turned 40 years old. And as a birthday present to myself, I went to Fiji for an incredible trip. I got scuba certified, and I love surfing and paddle surfing. And this is a photo of me on one of the most amazing waves. I got there. They got a photo of it. This was at a coral reef in the middle of nowhere. We were 15 minutes from the nearest island, just surfing these incredible waves in the middle of nowhere. But I was healthy. I was thriving. I was winning awards as a lawyer and a writer. Felt invincible. Everything is great. And I was just feeling like on top of the world in many ways. And we all have our own issues and stresses, but overall, I felt so good. Invincible. My health habits were good, if not great. But I felt fine. But there was this bump on my leg. And in that photo, I had that bump. It was on my leg. But here's a closer view of it. And you can see that's a pretty big bump, right? And you might be thinking, well, Mark, how did you let a bump get that big on your leg? Didn't you go to the doctor? I did go to the doctor. I went to the doctor a year before this to check it out. And my doctor said, don't worry about it. If it doesn't hurt, if it moves around a little bit, you're fine. It's almost certainly a lipoma. It's this fatty tissue thing. You might have to get surgery to get it removed, but don't worry about it. Come back if it gets painful or as it gets bigger, and we can see about getting it out. And my girlfriend at the time said, hey, Mark, you really need to go in and get this checked again. It's getting bigger. So I went back. And I had some tests done. And the doctor this time ordered tests. And he said, okay, well, we'll just rule out the worst case scenario, but you're fine. As I went through these tests, I was not even stressed. I was like, whatever. Okay, I'll get the test. They'll tell me what surgery I need, blah, 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 blah. We're good. They did a series of tests leading to a biopsy because they couldn't rule out everything. So they do a biopsy. I'm waiting for the results. I wasn't even stressed. I swear, I wasn't even worried about a phone call. I was just expecting them to say, okay, Mark, you got to get this annoying surgery, okay, whatever. And then I got the phone call. A moment I'll never forget. It was April 8th, 2019. 12:45 p.m. I was in an attorney's meeting. We have Monday attorneys meetings, and I got a phone call, two phone calls from Kaiser Medical Center. And I excuse myself and I get the call. And the doctor says, "Hey, Mark, we got your test results, and that bump in your leg is malignant." What does malignant mean? I'm thinking, okay, well, I may have to get surgery. Okay, malignant. That's not good, but I don't know what that means. Malignant. It can mean so many different things. So I blurt out, okay, well, what's the prognosis? And I'm thinking he's going to say, well, you'll need surgery. You'll be out 4 to 6 weeks, kind of like a pro athlete. What's the prognosis after an injury when a football player hurts his knee? I was expecting that. And his response to me shook me to my core. He said, oh, it's better than 50-50. What? I was expecting him to say, you're going to recover in X weeks. And he just told me that I had, quote, better than 50-50 odds of surviving. Because you see, this wasn't just a malignant thing. It was a sarcoma, as he told me, a rare type of muscle tumor. A sarcoma in my leg. This thing, the whole time, I had a cancerous tumor in my leg. My doctor didn't even catch it a year before. Lesson, always demand tests when you're in doubt, by the way. And he quickly backed off and said, oh, well, it's probably a lot better than that. You're young. We haven't tested to see how serious it is for it to spread, but maybe it's 60 or 70-30. Either way, I went from feeling invincible on this incredible surf trip to feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. I'm screwed. I'm going to die. What now? Your head's spinning. And anybody out there who's been through a call like that or a diagnosis, I think you can relate. You go into sort of shock. And this is actually a photo that I took of myself later that day. I was stunned. This is me that night, actually, when I was kind of reflecting on it. I just took a quick photo. I took some video journals too. I was stunned. Of course, I told my family right away. I did not share it with anybody outside of my inner circle. But that started me on this really scary but incredibly meaningful journey. I was, again, in shock. I didn't know what to do. And again, much of what I'm talking about here today is about what you can do in these situations. But I was facing my own mortality at 40 years old, thinking maybe I have 70-30 odds, but still I went from invincible to having a 1 in 3 chance of not being around in a couple of years. And those nights were the hardest of my life as I waited for the surgery. We wanted to get second opinions. We needed to do scans. And this is me in one of the first scans that I did. It was a CT scan to make sure that it hadn't spread. And that's me just trying to make the best of it, stunned. I didn't know what to think. I'm just going through these tests. Thankfully, the scans showed that it hadn't spread. It was local, but I was told that it was a high-grade tumor, which meant it had a high risk of coming back, that it could spread in the future. So I wasn't in the clear, but I definitely needed surgery. We got multiple opinions. Everybody said, you need surgery for sure. There was questions as to what I needed after surgery, where we really needed help. And that was scary. So I was terrified through all this. I had the surgery, though. They did a great job. So Dr. Fang at Kaiser did an amazing job. Here's a picture of my leg after they removed the tumor. So they took some of my leg muscle out with it to be extra careful. I was very lucky that it was right on the surface. They took it out. And believe it or not, so I didn't share this. And I think one lesson when you go through a diagnosis, some people want to share it with their friends and family right away. Other people are more private. Some people share it publicly. I didn't share it. I kept it to myself and to my family. I didn't want to have to keep people up to date. I was going through my own stuff. And I was determined to get meaning out of it, though. From the beginning, I said, hey, maybe this will get me, but either if it doesn't, this is going to be the most meaningful journey of my life. And believe it or not, like 2 weeks later, we had, for those of you who know our firm, we are going to start doing these again. We do annual special needs trust events where we give these huge presentations to hundreds of people about special needs planning and estate planning. So a week and a half, you see me, it's hard to see on the left. That's me with crutches. I was just coming out of that surgery. I couldn't even put weight on my leg, really. And Mike Gilfix, my dad, and I gave not one, but two-hour seminars that day to hundreds of people about estate planning and special needs planning. So ironically, I was talking about all these issues while I was going through this existential crisis of my own, but I just smiled. And when people asked, maybe some of you watching were there that day, people asked why I was on crutches. I said, oh, I just had an injury, had to have surgery. I didn't go into it. I didn't want to talk about it. But I kept going through my life. And some people, when they go through a diagnosis, they want to take a step back. Some people want to put their head down and work. I decided to just keep working and take the time I needed, but I wanted to keep my life as normal as I could. This is a couple weeks after that. That's me. I didn't shave, you can see, for a while. Shaving was the last thing on my mind. That's me with my mom. And I bring this photo up because there were so many incredible people who helped me through that really tough time. And it's so crucial to have that circle of support, whether you share it broadly or not, you need support. I had so many people, too many to thank here, but my mom was my superhero through it. She was my patient advocate. She was at every meeting with me. She was at every doctor's discussion. She was diving into the research about traditional treatments, non-traditional treatments, integrative medicine, holistic medicine, nutrition. So she helped me sort through all of that in such an extraordinary way. So Mom, thank you again for being there with me and for me through all of that. And that leads me to the next message that changed my life. So this was June 14th, 2019. It was around 8:45 p.m. It was a Friday night. I was at a Shabbat dinner with my sister and brother-in-law and my parents. The night before, I think it was the night before, maybe a couple nights before, I'd been to the Warriors game. Game 6 of the NBA Finals that year. I was going to treat myself. I was like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be around in a few years. I'm going to treat myself to go to Game 6 of the NBA Finals. The Warriors lost. It was an incredible experience. But this was like the day later, and I'm sitting at dinner and I get a message. And it was from Stanford Medical. You see, Kaiser was my primary care provider, but we'd asked for second opinions. And it took a lot of work. We finally got to the right doctor at Stanford through some neighbors who were in the Stanford Medical Center. And the head doctor of their sarcoma department, Dr. Ganju, had seen my test reports. And she said, you know, something's a little weird here. I want us to get a sample of your tumor so we can take a second look. And Kaiser said it was a high-grade tumor, pretty dangerous, that it could come back, that my prognosis was good, but not amazing. Stanford, after weeks, and I'm still annoyed it took this long, but after weeks, they finally got a copy or a sample of the tumor and they looked at it. And what they found changed my life in an amazing way. This message said, hey, Mark, great news. We got a sample of the tumor. It was not high grade. It was low grade. And in plain English, when you have a low grade sarcoma, or the type that I had, that means that for the type I had and where it was caught, I was pretty much in the clear. I went from being 60, 40, 70, 30 odds of being okay to pretty much back to a normal 40-year-old. And we had them triple check it and they were certain. They sent it to Kaiser. Kaiser actually agreed. Kaiser didn't have the right specialist looking at the beginning. Again, get a second and third opinion when you face a serious diagnosis. You never know what you're going to need to save your life. And that saved me from having to get chemotherapy or other unnecessary treatments. And this is an image of me right after that happened. I took a little video, tears of happiness here, not being stunned and just praying that it was true. And they did verify that it was true. So I went from thinking I was done to being like, hey, here's your new lease on life, Mark. What are you going to do with it? You're good. Maybe not 100%, but 98%, you know, where you're back to, you don't have to think about this too much anymore. We vetted it and everything. It was good. So that was a great email. And that started me on this road to recovering mentally and physically. I think I would have gotten through it mentally. I would have done it, but it would have been a lot harder. But having this news changed my life. And I hope anybody out there who gets a diagnosis gets good news later. I know that's not always the case. So December of 2019, I'm recovering on the water. I'm surfing. I'm feeling good. And I decided to go down to Los Angeles over the holidays to see some friends and to just celebrate life. I told some of my friends what I'd been through and I want to give them the good news. And I was single at the time. And so I take a trip down Highway 1 on California. Many of you have been there. Gorgeous, gorgeous, beautiful trip. This is me in Cambria on that trip. Stopped to surf on the way down before I spent time with friends in Los Angeles. And so on the holidays, again, December 2019, before some other stuff happened in society, as we all know. And I was single, and there was this girl I'd met in 2013, and she kind of dissed me. I tried to pursue her, but she popped back in my head, and for some reason, she'd been on my mind. So I reached out to her via email, and it took a couple of attempts, but she lived in LA, and I said, hey, I'm going to be in LA over the holidays. And I created a reason to get in touch with her. And I said, hey, can I get you a drink? Took multiple attempts, but this girl named Vera finally responded, gave me her number. We went on a date and we just clicked. Everything was great. It was perfect. After all these years, I finally found someone who seemed like, hey, maybe this could be really real. And I felt, having been through everything that I'd been through, that I had a real chance to start a new phase of my life and to move forward. And here is me and Vera in the first week that I re-met her. This is in December of 2019. So I meet this amazing girl. She's smart, she's funny, she's beautiful, and we just have this connection. And it's great. And I'd been through my journey and I shared it with her. And she was so supportive of what I had just been through. and wonderful about it. And this is right around February of 2019, right before the pandemic. This is us. We took a trip to Kona, Hawaii. This is us just celebrating life, healthy, getting ready for the next phase of life. And that set up the next part of this story. So everything was great. COVID hits, like actually let us spend more time together because Vera was living in LA. She got to spend a bunch of time at my house working remotely in San Francisco and in the Bay Area. So we spent weeks together. We got closer and closer. And one day, Vera was taking a shower in my house. And I don't have loofahs or sponges. She usually did. So she was using just her hands to soap herself up. And she felt a bump on her breast. And because I had just been through my journey and shared everything with her, she said, I'm going to get this checked right away. Maybe the old me might have said, I'll wait till my next doctor's appointment. But because she knew what I had been through, she immediately set up an appointment, got it tested. And that leads us to message number 3. On May 8th, 2020, about 5:30 p.m., I get a phone call from Vera. She was sobbing. He had just gotten off the phone with her doctor, and they had said, we'd run tests, and that bump on your breast is almost certainly breast cancer. I had just been through at the age of 40, this 1 in 10,000 type of sarcoma. It's extraordinarily, really rare. They don't know the cause of it. And I'd gotten through it. And I think I'm ready for this next phase. And then this girl who I'm falling in love with gets diagnosed with breast cancer. And I immediately get calm and I say, okay, well, maybe there's meaning here. You have just been through this. Use everything that you've learned to help this incredible person through this incredibly hard time. And that was one of the hardest times in my life again, because I knew what it was like to face your mortality. And again, many of you out there, you maybe face this or people you love. And I had to watch the woman that I love go through it too. And I knew what it was like, how lonely it could feel and how scary it could feel. But I was determined to use everything that I learned to help her through it. And she had to have surgery and treatment. And this is us. Sorry, I'm getting emotional revisiting this, but this is us in one of the early things. It's me holding her hand through one of her first treatments and first, I don't know what that was before. And then she had chemo. And she had chemo during the height of the pandemic when COVID was raging and no one knew what was happening. She was immunocompromised, so that wasn't fun. And this is her going through chemo. And she lost her hair, of course. And that's, again, many of you out there, you can relate to this. It's like this really hard thing. This is us, Lake Tahoe, that summer, me and her, Vera with her hair not there. So that was a really hard time, but I was able to draw on everything I've learned. My family was extraordinary. Her family was extraordinary. And as an estate planning attorney, I was able to help make sure we handled the logistical side and all that. I was trying to be as helpful as I could. But I went through this. But happily, we had caught her cancer very early. So her prognosis was also amazing. Thank God I didn't have a loofah in my shower. So we caught it early. She did go through chemo, but it was preventative. It wasn't to cure something that had spread. So a year later, May 2021, we go back to Hawaii to celebrate our health and our life. Same spot we'd been, or same area we'd been in February of 2020, right before the pandemic and right before Vera had to go through her cancer journey. And I had an ulterior motive on that trip. You see, I wanted to propose to her. I wanted to make her my wife. And so I did. And this is a photo right after she said yes, accepting my proposal to be my wife on the beach in Kona in May of 2021. And this is a photo of us right after. So this is me and her. That's with the ring. And it was an extraordinary experience. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. We've been through so much together. I mean, between the pandemic and then my cancer journey, her cancer journey, going through this together and getting to a great place, it was amazing. And here's something that gave me chills when I was reviewing photos to put together for this. So if you recall, I had gotten the call that Vera had been diagnosed with breast cancer on May 8th, 2020 at about 5:30 p.m. I did not plan this, But when I proposed to her, it was May 8th, 2021, 5:30 p.m. Like the same time, almost exactly a year from that phone call. And to me, I didn't plan this. The fact I didn't know the dates, I didn't know the time. I only realized that today. So I feel like there was some meaning to be had from that, that maybe this was all meant to be, that I was meant to go through my journey to help her through her journey. And we came full circle, from health to sickness back to health and now together. And I want to share that with the client community, with our general community. So I didn't plan it, but oh my God, that gave me chills. It was 1 year, almost to the minute, that I proposed to her from that first fateful phone call. So we, long story short, well, long story long, we got married April 30th of last year. This is us at the wedding. And Vera shared our story a little bit, and she shared her story from the very beginning. She was public with it. And I think one lesson I took from this is, if you face this diagnosis, it's up to you to decide how much you share it. I didn't want to share it publicly, my journey. Vera shared hers publicly from the first moment of the first phone call, to get friends and family involved. And there's value to both. There's no right or wrong answer. And then Vera shared it. And actually the New York Times, maybe some of you saw it, New York Times actually wrote a little story about our journey in the mini vows section. So you can find our little article, just look up, Mark Gilfix, New York Times, Vera Golosker, and you'll find our story. So they put a little story. So that started to share our story with people that we loved, and got an outpouring of really nice notes from friends and family. And what I want to take from this, and I will get to more the legal side of this, but I've been through this. I know what it's like. And I know how hard it is. And it's so hard to go through facing a serious medical diagnosis, and then having to think about the legal and the financial and the insurance side of it. But I think through all of this, I just had this incredible sense of gratitude. It gave me just this reminder that life is so short and precious. Maybe you can relate to that. And Vera and I learned so much from the experience, so much wisdom and so much knowledge that helps me in how I work with clients today, and how I can relate to those of you out there who are facing this and in anticipating it. And Vera and I are so lucky. I want to emphasize, I'm good. My prognosis went from shaky to exceptional. I'm pretty much in the clear. Vera is very close to that as well. We are healthy, and we're working to build a life together, and we know we're not alone. And of course, our journey continues. And I want to share our story. And I hope if it helps anybody out there, you're not alone, and there's so much meaning you can take from these journeys. And it's my privilege that in what I do day to day as an estate planning attorney, I can use what I've learned to help families too. Because it's not just the legal documents, it's how do you bring the family together? How do you navigate the medical system? How do you make sure your finances are all in order? There's so much to it, but it's so important to keep that positive mental attitude and have that support system around you. So I hope you got a lot out of my story. And again, our journey continues. So going to get to the legal aspect of this and some specifics that you should know if you face this, but I hope you got something out of that. And if there's anybody in your life going through this, there are resources out there. Don't go through it alone. But it can be a really powerful experience. But it forces us to face our mortality and realize just how precious this time is. And that's the central theme, I think, of estate planning, what we do. So let's get to now the lessons. I think one big overarching lesson of all this, when you face a diagnosis, is control. You can control. You have emotion swirling. You have fear. You have confusion. And I want the rest of this talk to be about what you can control, because you cannot control necessarily the outcome of your medical issue. My wife and I were lucky. Ours turned out with a happy ending, but that's not always the case. Maybe in the future we'll face another issue. Who knows? The majority of Americans, majority of people around the world eventually face really serious challenges. And I want to give you some specific tips on what you can do to protect yourself and your family if and when you face this issue, or if someone you love faces these issues. But just control and let go of the other stuff. I got a lot of help from reading the ancient Stoics. So like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and some of those. And there's just so much wisdom out there. Draw on it. Get that help. So, okay, I have to take a breath. I'm a little emotional. That was a lot to share. But again, there's a reason why I wanted to share it. I hope you get meaning out of it. And this informs everything else I'm about to talk to you about. So, estate planning after serious diagnosis. What are some of the specific things I'm now going to cover for the rest of our time here today? The 3 critical documents that you and your family need after a diagnosis? What do you need? Why do they have to be updated? How do you create them? Next level planning considered. Just because you have a serious medical issue doesn't mean you shouldn't think about protecting your loved ones after you're gone. So I want to make sure that you're at least aware of some of the key tools you can put into place to protect your hard-earned assets after you're gone, because you start to think about that when you face these diagnoses. And the critical importance of having a patient advocate. I'm going to talk just a little bit about how that helps me and how that can be part of this process. So if you have questions, use the Q&A function. I'm going to get to some questions at the end. And we're going to get through a lot. So I want to just tell, I don't think you already told a story, but I want to just tell just really briefly a story of Charles. And this is an illustration of what happens if there's no estate plan in the worst case scenario. So Charles was an older gentleman in his late 70s, maybe his early 80s, actually. He was referred to our office by a concerned neighbor who'd grown close to him. See, Charles had no family, no kids, no cousins or siblings that he was close to, lived in the Bay Area, had a house worth over $2 million. He had money in the bank, but his house was falling into disrepair, and his house, and when the neighbor visited, she could see dishes were piled up. He was becoming a hoarder, and she was worried about him. And she got him to come in to meet with me. And I said, Charles, he had no estate plan in place, but he had millions of dollars. He had plenty of assets, no close family, few close friends, no estate plan. And we worked together. We had a meeting. We actually came to some pretty good conclusions. He named some people he trusted, some longtime friends, to be his successor trustees. He wanted his assets to go to charity, to support nonprofits and scholarships. He didn't want them going to random relatives he hadn't talked to in decades. And he, very importantly, wanted to empower people to help him right away, because he knew, he was aware in our talk that he needed some help. Long story short, we send him drafts, and he reaches out to us and said, hey, what are these documents? Who is Gilfix La Poll Associates? What are you doing? I didn't ask for this. We said, Charles, we met just a couple of weeks ago. He didn't remember anything. So he had dementia, and his dementia had gotten worse and worse and worse. So needless to say, we couldn't finish his estate plan. He didn't even trust us. He didn't remember meeting with us. So we had no estate plan. And what happened? His health declined. Nobody was empowered to help him. Adult Protective Services had to be called. The county got a conservatorship over him, and county workers, very well-meaning but overwhelmed and not enough time, they took over his life. And public officials basically determined what happened to Charles after that. He didn't get the care he wanted. His assets ended up going to relatives he hadn't, distant relatives he had never spoken with in years, or hadn't spoken with in years, and it was a disaster. So I want to make sure that you're not in Charles's position. So really quickly, for those of you who don't know our firm, this is what we do. We've been around, we're celebrating 40 years this year. We've helped thousands of families in California through these issues. We're featured in the national media. We do a lot of speaking about this, a lot of writing about this. And this is what we do. We help families to protect their assets, to deal with taxes, to protect their kids from divorce and lawsuits and things like that. But most importantly, we want to help people through the toughest moments of their lives, at least from the legal side of things. And we're very proud of that. And my own experience helps me every day with that. So let's go into some more specifics. So why do you need an estate plan? Again, if you worked with us in the past, or if you already have an estate plan, you understand this. But if you don't, and if you need to share this with someone who doesn't have an estate plan, why? You think, I don't want to work with lawyers. An estate plan is not about high net worth planning for dynastic families. It's about making sure that you're covered in a crisis or in a diagnosis, and that people that you love are empowered, who you love and trust, are empowered to help you in those tough situations. If you don't have an estate plan in place, it can be extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, for people you love and trust to help you. And when you're going through a medical crisis, you don't want to have to think about these things. So you want to make sure you have that plan in place either before, or you want to make sure you update it right after and make that part of those steps you take when you face that diagnosis. And to make sure your hard-earned assets go to the people that you love. And when you're dealing with this crisis, if it's a diagnosis, whether it's a stroke, a heart attack, an accident, dementia, a new heart issue, or cancer, a cancer diagnosis, as my wife and I have been through, you and your family need to be prepared. And if you're unprepared, what happens? Well, your life may end up in the courts. Your family may have to get a conservatorship. It may be an absolute nightmare. So I'd say the first thing to think about here, whether you've been through a challenging situation or not, is to talk to your family or your loved ones about this. And then instead of meeting with us, Gilfix La Poll, or some attorney, you need to work with an attorney about this. A big part of our job as attorneys is to help you get to the finish line, to identify the choices you need to make and get those documents into place. When people try to do it themselves, I think most of the time they don't get done, or they get done incorrectly. But you should talk to your family especially if you're facing an issue, and say, hey, are you guys ready and able? Step in and help me if and when I need it. That's the first thing. And then set that meeting with attorneys, or I guess, you know what, set a meeting with an attorney first, and we can help you down that process. But you need to address it, because if you're facing a crisis, these documents are even more important. So I want to give four immediate recommendations after a serious diagnosis. If you get that phone call, like I got, my wife got, like so many of our clients have gotten, that it's either cancer or a heart issue or some serious issue. Four tips, things that I've learned on my own journey. One, get second and third opinions right away. If it's anything in question, just get them. Don't think that, oh, well, I know what's happening. You never know what the second and third opinion they're going to say. A second opinion helped save me from a bunch of unnecessary treatment and me back in a great place. It let me know that I was actually going to be okay. And I needed that second opinion to get that. Work with doctors that you like. You need to meet with lots of doctors. Choose to work with a medical team that is positive, that is not dour and negative, that can have a huge impact on your healing. I met with doctors in multiple places, Stanford, Kaiser, UCSF, and I can tell you the same types of meetings giving me the same information. Some of those meetings I left feeling like I was good. I was going to fight this. I was going to win. Other meetings I left feeling like I was done. Same news, same statistics. Find doctors who make you feel positive, you feel good. That can have a huge healing effect. Don't get stuck with negative doctors or negative teams. That can have a huge impact on your recovery. Have a patient advocate with you at all meetings. What does that mean? It can be someone who you love. It doesn't have to be anyone specific, who goes to meetings with you, who takes notes, who questions doctors, who's in the hospital with you whenever possible. You should have someone there with you. You can't keep track of it all yourself. And it doesn't have to be the same person every meeting, but you should have somebody there at every meeting. Keep a notebook, keep track of everything the best you can, and catch your breath. When you face a serious medical issue, take a moment, reflect, deal with the immediate medical crisis, breathe, and then take that separate step. The next step really should be making sure your estate plan is up to date, because that can have a profound impact on your care and on the protection of your assets, and really on your ability to recover over the long term. But you don't need to think of it all at once. First, deal with the medical emergency, get that team together, have that patient advocate, and then address your estate plan if you haven't done it recently. And getting organized after a diagnosis, another tip. So if you face this, get help with this. You need some help pulling all your documentation together, insurance information, bank account information, financial information, get it all together. Because if you can't deal with this as you go through your challenges or as it gets worse, you need to make sure your loved ones are empowered to help. But they also know where your assets are and where your medical information is and where your insurance information is. And set discussions with people you've named in your estate plan. If you haven't recently, if you've named successor trustees or backups in your advance directive, set those conversations with them, because again, the future is now. If you face a diagnosis or a serious issue, they may be called upon. And if you're able to talk to them, do it. Let them know what's happening. Give them a heads up, and they can do a much better job for you. So again, take time to reflect as well. Think about what really matters and make sure that your estate plan reflects that. So if you have a recent estate plan, it may not be up to date. When you face your own mortality, when it's staring you in the face, I think many of you can relate to this. You think differently about things. Your bequest plan, maybe you're leaving money to a friend you haven't talked to in a number of years. Maybe this is a wake-up call. Hey, I haven't even talked to that person. So this is if you have kids, maybe you stick with your kids. But if for a lot of our clients who don't have kids, we've seen them do complete 180s and where they want their assets to go. Maybe it was a friend who they haven't talked to, and they're like, oh my gosh, wait, they're not even in my life anymore. I want to leave to charities or these other people who've more recently been a part of my life. So you want to make sure that you have the right people empowered to help you. If you have an old estate plan, it might be people who are no longer even available or no longer part of your life. Make sure it's up to date. And are your assets, everything you work so hard for? Just because you're facing your mortality doesn't mean, in fact, it heightens that need to think about, work so hard for all this. Where is it all going? Is it going to the right places? Am I protecting it for future generations? So going to the 3 big documents we all need. So I set the groundwork. You need to have these discussions. You need to take a breath. Reflect on what you want and what you care about. But we need to make sure your big 3 documents are up to date. So if you face a serious diagnosis, deal with the medical side, get those second opinions, have the healthcare patient advocate with you, whoever that is in the hospital, but then you got to turn to your estate plan. And the 3 documents that really govern everything: your revocable living trust, your durable power of attorney for finances, and your advanced healthcare directive for medical decision making. And and if you have kids and grandkids, you could really add family protection trust, dynasty trust for them. Because just because you're going through a crisis doesn't mean you can't protect assets. In fact, it probably heightened the need to protect assets for future generations. And there are ways that we can do that. So if you're going to update your estate plan, do it right. There's no reason not to. And I have these little asterisks here for the durable power of attorney for finance in the advanced directive, that if they are more than 5 years old, you should update them. Even if you did them with us or another expert, even if the people named are still the people you want, documents can become stale. And by that, I mean, if documents are more than 5 years old, hospitals and banks get very difficult to work with. They're always difficult to work with anyway. If any of you have dealt with banks and estate planning issues can probably attest to that. We help clients do that all the time. But if documents are older, they are much more likely to face scrutiny and challenges. If they're done more recently, you face a medical diagnosis, it's a good time to refresh them. Even if it is basically refreshing, saying basically the same things you had in a previous document, there's a huge value in having documents that are signed in 2023 rather than 2017 or 2010 or older. Not to mention the fact that documents change over time. Your wishes change, the law changes, so you want to make sure everything's up to date. So I'm going to briefly go through each one of these, why it's so important. So many of you, this might be redundant, maybe you're familiar with this, but many people, it's not. And share this with somebody. Comment on this, by the way, if you're watching as a recording, if you have other questions about this, but share this with somebody who needs to see this if they don't know. If there's a parent or a nephew, an uncle or whatever who doesn't have an estate plan or doesn't have an up-to-date one, share this with them. So revocable living trust, you need to have an up-to-date one. It should not just be a simple one you downloaded and did, or you did it many years ago. This governs everything, every major asset you own and where it's going. It's a document. And if you're married, there are different structures that can have a profound impact on your family's tax exposure. So just take a fresh look at it, make sure your backup trustees are right, make sure your assets are going where you want them to go, and make sure you have the right trust structure. It doesn't take much more time to make sure everything is right than it does to just make simple updates. If you're going to meet with us or another expert attorney, you're going to have to go through these decisions anyway. So even if you have a trust that you did a few years ago, don't think that that's necessarily enough. And if you don't have a trust, you absolutely need one. Let me just review really quickly for those of you who don't. Some people think, well, I have a will, I don't need that. Let me just briefly go through why you need a trust instead of a will. If you have a will, even if it's validly done and it says where your assets are going, well, one, it's going to be very simplistic in how assets are distributed. Usually there's no protections for future generations, but really importantly, a will does not help you while you're alive. You name an executor, they cannot do anything for you until they have a death certificate. They can't help you while you're alive. And then if you have a will and you have any assets, really, they're going to be stuck in probate. It is hugely expensive. It's 2 to 3 times as expensive as doing things privately with a trust. It is totally public. So when you see celebrities who pass away and there's tons of information about everything they have and where it's going, it's probably because they just had a will. So it's public and it takes forever. It can take 2 to 3 years in California for probate. It's a horrible process. A trust, on the other hand, keeps the courts out of it, keeps your affairs out of the courts. The costs of administering a trust are less than half of that of a probate. It is not public, and it can be done much more efficiently. It still takes time, but it's not 2 or 3 years. It can be done much more effectively. And very importantly, your successor trustees can help you while you're alive, unlike an executor. So that's a really important thing when you're facing a medical issue. So a trust, not a will. Make sure you have that. A durable power of attorney for finances. So this is a very confusing term. I think a lot of people get confused about what is power of attorney. Like, is that, I like to say, is that the lamest superhero ever? Like, I have power of attorney, I can argue in courts, and that's a lame superhero, but it's actually a hugely important document. So if you face a diagnosis or an illness or just can't manage your day-to-day financial affairs, who can do that? Well, the power of attorney gives someone you trust the ability to step in either right away when you sign it or upon your incapacity, and that's a critical choice to make, to help you with day-to-day financial issues, to pay your day-to-day bills, to deal with Social Security, to deal with your retirement accounts, and maybe to take steps to protect your assets on your behalf if you have really expensive long-term care or serious tax issues. Can be easily abused if you name the wrong person and give them too much power. So you have to be really careful. They need to be updated every 3 to 5 years. And the versions that we create are not check the box. Don't just do check the box forms you can download. Those are missing what we believe, we always consider to be really important powers around protecting your assets in case you need long-term care or have very expensive tax issues. I want to tell a very quick story, an anecdote that I recently, a situation that a friend of mine just recently called me, and this is the danger of not creating a durable power of attorney document with an attorney. And yes, this is self-serving. We think everybody should work with estate planning attorneys on these. Some people do them on their own. And my friend had worked with his dad. They downloaded a power of attorney form and he signed it. And his dad had dementia, but his dad was okay at the time, but he was declining quickly. And my friend called me because his dad was in the hospital, couldn't make decisions. And my friend was trying to get access to his dad's accounts to pay his medical bills. When he presented the power of attorney document that was signed and notarized to the bank, I think it was Chase. And Chase said, okay, this is great, but we need an attorney's note saying we worked with your dad. Let's call him Mr. Smith. We worked with Mr. Smith. We executed this document with him and we verify that it is valid and true. And he said, could you do that? And I said, well, no, we didn't help him with the power of attorney. You did it on your own. I'm happy to maybe offer an opinion letter that this looks valid, but I can't help you with that. So he goes back to the bank and says, I can't get an attorney's note because we didn't do it with an attorney. And they say, okay, well, in lieu of that, for us to accept this power of attorney and give you the ability to manage your dad's accounts, we now need your dad to sign a detailed statement saying he understands what a power of attorney is, that he understands what he's giving up and blah, blah, blah. Obviously, his dad couldn't sign that because my friend wouldn't have had to use the power of attorney in the first place if his dad could make decisions. His dad had serious dementia and obviously couldn't make any decisions. He couldn't sign anything now. So the bank said, because you didn't create this with an attorney, in essence, you're out of luck. And it was a nightmare. My friend had to sort through this. He had to use his own money. It became a huge mess. It was never really cleared up. So do these documents with attorneys. I know you shouldn't have to, but banks will sometimes refuse power of attorney documents without an attorney verifying that they were done properly. Should it be that way? I don't think so. But aside from the fact we can do a better job on it, sometimes banks don't accept them if they're not done by attorneys, which boggles my mind, but it is what it is. And even if you'll win that argument eventually, it might take weeks to get through their legal department to get there. So get a power of attorney done. Make sure it has provisions around long-term care, asset protection, tax planning. If you face a serious health diagnosis, your advanced healthcare directive is absolutely critical. How many of you out there have up-to-date advanced healthcare directives? Raise your hand. I can't see you, but that's okay. I hope everybody has that. And if you're a client of ours, you should have it. You can create advanced healthcare directives with hospital systems. So Kaiser has them. I know Paul, the Medical Foundation, many big medical systems have their own versions. I generally would recommend you should also have one that's independent of any medical system. So if you face a diagnosis, you need to make sure your advanced directive is up to date. Not this that you did one a long time ago. Again, if there's an old document that was created 10 years ago, even if the people named still match who you'd want, I still recommend updating it. Again, especially if you face a diagnosis, because that document may be used. Your family may have to use it right away. Because if you don't have an advanced healthcare directive, aside from your spouse, they have some access. No one in your family can even look at your medical records, can talk to doctors on your behalf, no one can make decisions for you. So you have to authorize that in an advanced healthcare directive. It is so crucial. Without that, it can be a nightmare for families to even try to help you in a hospital setting. So an advanced directive is simply where you name someone you love and trust to step in. Well, you don't have to love them, you have to trust them, to step in and communicate on your behalf, to view your medical records, and to make decisions for you in a medical setting. And it is a document that should have a HIPAA waiver in it. And it should reflect your wishes for really challenging situations. What if you're in a coma and you're not going to come out of it, or persistent vegetative state? What if you can't make decisions and you have a terminal cancer diagnosis? Should your loved ones consider chemotherapy for you, even if it can't cure you? There's a lot of really tough decisions that you don't want to necessarily push upon your family. You want to give them some guidance ahead of time. And the advanced healthcare directive not only can authorize the people who you trust to step in for you, but it can give them guidance on what you would want in really challenging situations. So again, really important to update this every few years. If they get old, hospitals are less likely to honor them. And we always recommend we create versions of these that are independent of any hospital. So you can do them with your healthcare provider. Again, I know Kaiser has their own internal forms, but if you do a Kaiser form and you get care at another facility, I had to get a second opinion at Stanford. If I had just done a Kaiser form, I don't think Stanford would have accepted that. So always good to have one that's independent of any medical facility as well. We can always help with that. Make sure that's up to date. That should be one of the first documents you look at when you face a serious health issue, or if a loved one faces that, talk to them while they still can. Get them to create an advanced healthcare directive. Of course, we can help with that. And okay, I want to shift to a different issue. If you face a serious diagnosis or a serious health issue, and you or a loved one is going to have stays in the hospital. I had surgery when I went through my health issue. My wife was in in the hospital here and there when she went through chemotherapy. It's a tough thing, but there's a hidden danger out there. And I want to just ask, what are the top 3 killers of Americans, at least in a hospital setting? You might be very quick to say, well, I'm sure cancer is one of them, and it is. I'm sure heart disease is another, and it is. But the third might surprise and shock you. The third leading cause of death in hospitals, I'm not sure if I'm getting this exactly right, medical errors. Medical errors. So there are estimates that between 250,000 and 440,000 Americans die every year in the hospital as a result of unnecessary medical errors. Not a health issue, but a problem caused because the hospital screwed up. I respect doctors and nurses so much. This is not a criticism of them. This is a systemic issue. They are overwhelmed at times. There's so much paperwork. One hand doesn't always talk to the other, and errors happen. Again, everybody in the medical system, I think, means very well. This is not saying screw you, doctors or nurses. No, I love doctors and nurses. You are the saviors of our society in many cases. But that doesn't mean mistakes don't happen. So what can you do about medical errors in the hospital? Don't just think you go in the hospital and everything's covered. You need a patient advocate. I truly believe that can save your life. My mother, Myra Gerson-Gilfix, really opened my eyes to this. She's published articles about this. She has Myra's Healthcare Huddle on Gilfix.com. It's easy to find in our blog section. She has a lot of pieces about this. But what is a patient advocate? I alluded to this earlier. When you go through a diagnosis or a loved one goes through a diagnosis, serious medical issue, it is crucial that someone is there with them at every meeting whenever possible, that someone is with them as much as possible in the hospital. And what does it mean to be an advocate? You don't have to be an expert. It helps if you're an expert. My mom was an extraordinary healthcare advocate for me because she studied this and she is passionate about this. But what does it mean if you're not an expert? Take notes, get someone to help you if you're the one facing the diagnosis, if you're helping a loved one out. Take notes for them in meetings. Keep copies of everything. Ask questions of doctors. If you're the one going through it, as I can personally attest to, it's hard to think of all the questions. Your head is spinning. You're facing your own mortality. It is hard to get down to the details and ask for second opinions and third opinions. So it's someone who will push for you, will make sure that multiple people in the hospital are checking on things, make sure that your medication isn't mixed up in the hospital, checking that testing is done properly. There are many times where a test is ordered or a doctor will say, you need to get this test. I can personally attest to this. Say, oh, we're going to do this scan for you. And no one contacts me about the scan. I had to be the one who followed up to set the scan. So it might be as simple as keeping track of what doctors say you should do and making sure it happens. If you're in the hospital, it can be as simple as making sure everybody who walks in washes their hands. It can be as simple as making sure that the new nurse who's on shift now has the notes from the previous nurse, little things, but it shows you're on top of it. And again, hospital staffs all mean well. They are working their butts off, but they get overwhelmed too. And errors happen. So having that patient advocate is huge. And if my mom is available, and she is actually available for our current clients, members of our Peace of Mind program, she will speak to people at no charge. If you're a member of our Gilfix La Poll Peace of Mind program, she'll talk to you about this if you face this. She'll give you tips on it. But most importantly, have someone there with you that can help prevent medical errors from causing you problems and keep you out of that 250,000 per year number. So have that advocate there. And when you face a diagnosis, I think it's critical to involve your kids. This is true in any situation. We recommend multi-generational planning. You should talk about your estate plan with people. We don't think it should be put in a drawer and set aside until a crisis happens. Ideally, you should talk to your loved ones ahead of time. If you've named people in your power of attorney and your advance directive, give them copies. If you change it, that's not always right. Not every situation. Your trust, you don't necessarily have to share copies of that. That shows your bequest plan. You might not want to share all of that, where your assets are going, but there's no reason not to share copies of your advance directive, of your power of attorney with people, and to talk to people. Bring them in. If someone's named in your documents, they don't have to serve. If you named, if I named my sister Jamie as my second backup for medical decision making, I don't want her. If my wife couldn't help me and she was called upon, I don't want her to be caught out of left field. Where she's like, wait, what? Mark named me in this? You should talk to your loved ones ahead of time. Let them know you've named them so they're ready to go and they're prepared and they know what to do. A lot of our clients will set up multi-generational or multi-family meetings where we'll do Zoom meetings or in person, where it's our clients, their kids, their grandkids, everybody named in the documents. we don't have to go through the financial side of things, but we want to let people know where they're named and what they can do in these situations to help. So I think when you face this diagnosis, you need to get your trust, your power of attorney, your advance directive up to date. Talk to people ahead of time. And when you face this, set a family meeting or something, let people know, hey, you may be called upon soon. There's no downside to doing that. Because if you feel uncomfortable talking to them about your plan and the role they might have, they probably shouldn't be named in the documents in the first place. So I think that's something to revisit and set a meeting with us or another expert estate planning attorney to make sure everything is really tied together. I would be remiss if I didn't also identify the really powerful things you should do. If you're going to revisit your estate plan, you may as well know the powerful things you can do to protect future generations. So if you face this, again, when I faced my own mortality, when I had that really huge scare a few years ago, it was over 4 years ago, I very much started to think about where are my assets going. I had a trust. I'd done it a few years before, but when I faced my own mortality, I had new thoughts. I was like, wow, I gotta change this. This is not what I want anymore. What can you do? If you have kids or grandkids, we think you should add, if you don't have them already, family protection trusts, generically known as dynasty trusts. So if you're going to update your plan, do it right. Protect. I think that can be health giving if you know that everything you worked for is going to be protected for future generations, truly, because it takes this extra burden off your shoulders to know it's not all just going to go away. So there's a lot in that. Michael Gilfix just published an article in Bottom Line Personal about dynasty trusts. That's a generic type of this, but just flagging this. It's not the focus of this talk, but if you're gonna update your estate plan, why not protect your kids from divorce and lawsuits and estate taxes? So by leaving assets to protective trusts, you can keep what you left them out of a divorce settlement. If they inherit directly and commingle, it could be lost. If your kid is sued, what you leave them is exposed. If it's in a family protection trust, there's a barrier protecting them. When they pass away, everything you left them, if it's to them, it's all part of their taxable estate. Maybe 30, 40, 50% that's lost. If it's in a trust, it can all be protected. And your kids can be their own backup trustees. So if you don't want to tie their hands, I get that. They can be their own trustee of this trust. So it's not the focus of the talk today, but I want to let you know, you do not have to be high net worth. This is something that really everybody should consider. If you own a house, that's enough in my view to justify creating these trusts for your kids. Why not protect your kids and grandkids from divorce lawsuits and future estate taxes if it's not too difficult to do? I'd say the majority of our clients end up adding these. So something to think about. If you're going to update your plan, why not do it right? Really, really important. If you have a child or a grandchild with a disability and you are facing your own mortality or updating your estate plan, do not leave money directly to that child with a disability. Instead, create a special needs trust. There's a picture of a book, Special Needs Trust Creation and Management Guide, that my father and I co-authored. We do a lot of speaking and writing and communicating about this, but you need to prepare that. Don't leave assets directly to someone with a disability. And again, if you face your own mortality with a serious health issue, it's very real, it's very immediate, and it can be actually a really bad thing if you leave a big chunk of money to someone with serious disabilities because they lose public benefits. They probably can't manage it. They may have to go to court or their family may have to go to court to fix it all. You just create a special needs trust. You name a third party to oversee it for that loved one, and the money in the trust doesn't interfere with public benefits. So think about, so we have a lot of webinars on our Gilfix Law YouTube channel about special needs trust and dynasty trusts. We have a lot of talks about it. So check out our Gilfix Law YouTube channel for more information about that. Share this with someone who needs to see it. Or leave a comment or question if you have that. I'll get to questions in a second. If it's a YouTube you're watching this on, leave a comment. Let us know if any of this is too much or if you have any thoughts about, if you're going to address your estate plan, why not protect assets for future generations? So special needs trusts or family protection trust, we think those should be there for virtually every estate plan if you have kids and grandkids. So let's get to some closing thoughts. What are the key decisions you have to make as part of all this? If you face a serious diagnosis, you revisit the things that matter. Anybody out there who's been through a serious health issue or even seen a loved one go through that, decisions that seem sort of theoretical become very, very real, very real. So you need to think about who would be your successor trustee. Who have you empowered to step in to manage your finances, to make medical decisions for you? And it's not who you love the most, by the way. It's someone who you can rely on, someone who is organized and responsible. And if you don't have anybody in your immediate family who can do it, you might look to other close relatives, close longtime family friends. And if you don't have anybody in those circles, that's where you might look to the world of professionals, whether professional fiduciaries. There are bank trust departments, and sometimes we attorneys occasionally serve as trustee as well. So you need to think about that. And right now, I want you to take a moment and think, do you have these documents in place? If so, do you know who you named? Are they still right? And if not, or if you're not sure, set that meeting to review it. We can help you very efficiently go through it to make updates or at least understand what you have in place, because it might not be the right thing. Other key decisions that you have to make if you face a diagnosis, we talked about a trust and a power of attorney. Those are both documents that work together to allow you to name a person or people who can step in to manage your financial life, your major assets, your day-to-day business of life issues. If you face a serious issue, whether it's dementia or a cancer diagnosis where you're going to undergo a lot of rough treatment, you might want to consider giving power right away. And what do I mean by that? In your trust, you could name someone as your trustee right now. If I wanted to give my wife Vera full power over my own living trust, I could do that. Or if you want to give your eldest child the ability to really step in and manage your assets right away, you can do that. You can name them as the trustee right now. You can always revoke that and change it as long as you have capacity. In your power of attorney document, they can either be springing, meaning the person who you name can only step in if you're incapacitated and they have a doctor's note showing that, but you can actually give someone power of attorney right away. So you need to feel really good about who you're naming to even consider giving someone the power right away. But if you face a serious health issue, you may want to consider giving the people you've named in your documents or the people you're thinking about naming the ability to step in right away, where they don't have to show doctor's notes that, hey, just step in right away for me. You can always take it back, but it can make life easier for you if you have the right people named. So really crucial to talk to an expert before even considering that, and we can help you with that. And how do you put a plan into place? So those of you out there who work with our firm, Gilfix La Poll, you can just come to us anytime. Share this with someone who needs to know this. Please, there's so much misinformation, ignorance out there. I see on social media, so much misinformation. Work with an expert attorney. You can, again, share this with somebody who needs to know. I hope it's with us at Gilfix La Poll. If you're in California, we can help you. But regardless, don't do it on your own. Don't try this at home. The stakes are too high. Online services or downloadable forms, they can be fine, but we see sometimes people make horrible decisions in them just because you don't know what you don't know. So work with an attorney, and especially when you face a medical issue, the stakes are so much higher. Make sure they're done right. Get expert guidance on making those decisions. And once you do, when you work with us, we get decisions. We send out drafts within usually a couple of weeks. You review them, and once you confirm them, you sign them with a notary. It doesn't have to be in an attorney's office. You can have a mobile notary come to you. Sometimes people sign documents at home, sometimes even in hospitals when they have long-term stays. That's not that uncommon if you have a serious issue. So you don't need to ever see us in person. It can all be done via video or any attorney you work with, but make sure that they're all updated right away. And sometimes in emergencies, we can speed that process up. If we know someone has a serious surgery, we can expedite it. We can put it at the top of the list and try to get documents done in just a matter of days. Or sometimes when there's a serious issue, people want that. We will make it work. If we have to do it, we can do it. So you can do it very quickly. Usually it takes a few weeks to get it done. But work with an expert on that. Don't try this at home, especially when you face a serious health issue. These documents will be used, so make sure they're done right. And let's say you're in an emergency. Let's say you have a medical emergency. How are your estate planning documents? How do they come in? How are they used? How do they empower your family? Well, if you become ill or serious issues, you can resign as trustee and someone signs acceptance. You have to work with an attorney to do this. Someone can step in, but you should give copies of the documents to banks. You need to make sure that the powers that be have evidence you've given powers to your loved ones to step in. If you have a trust that says my backups can only step in if I'm incapacitated, let's say you're the family member helping out a loved one, a parent, and they're the ones who are sick, you're going to need to get notices of incapacity from doctors. You'll probably need 2 separate doctors to write notes. They know how to do this, to say, in my view, Mr. Smith, based on my medical expertise, Mr. Smith can no longer, based on a medical issue, manage his own finances. There's phrasing that doctors use. I'm not an expert at that. When I need it, I know it, but you need a doctor's note, and ideally 2 separate doctor's note. You present those with a copy of the documents to the bank, to the financial institution, to the Social Security office. You give them copies along with those doctor's notes. So you should keep copies. There's no reason not to give copies of your power of attorney to your banks. There's no reason not to give copies of your advance directive ahead of time to hospitals. There's not much private information in those and they need to see these if and when the time comes when you'll need help. So get the documents done. And if you're the loved one stepping in for somebody, you're going to need doctor's notes typically to show that the person you're going to step in for is incapacitated. But ahead of time, if you're the one facing this issue, get copies, give them to banks, give copies of your advance directive to hospitals and to your doctors. There's really very little downside. Your trust, you might not share all of that. You actually share what we call the certification of trust. It's like a summary of your trust that we create for you. It doesn't have your bequest plan. A lot of people don't want to share where all their money's going, but you do have to share that you have a trust and whose name is the trustee. So in an emergency or ahead of time, give copies to institutions. If you're the one stepping in for a loved one, get those notices of incapacity along with copies of the documents and use those to get access to managed accounts or to make medical decisions. And so just wrapping this up, what can you do to protect your family, your hard-earned legacy, and your rights and your health and safety? I hope nobody out here faces a diagnosis, but I know many of you have. Again, you're not alone. I've been through this. My wife has been through this. Many people I know and love and have worked with have been through this. But overcome the danger of delay and denial. Don't think, well, this will never happen to me, or, well, it did happen to me, but I'll get to this later. Your estate planning documents, they're not just dry legal documents. They're about empowering people that you love and trust to step in for you. They govern everything in your life. I can't emphasize that enough. These are not just side documents that are nice to have. They literally can determine the course of your future and your care if and when you need it. So don't think, I don't want to work with a lawyer. I don't want to spend the extra few $100s or a couple $1,000s. If you don't work with a lawyer up front, your family's going to be stuck working with lawyers later and spending a lot more money. So let's plan ahead of time. Our team is not just me, by the way. We have a great team of estate planning experts: Nick Klingenberg, Renee Conrad, me, Mark Gilfix, Michael Gilfix, Francis La Poll. We have an amazing team, over 120 years of combined experience. We would love to get the chance to work with you at Gilfix and La Poll. For those of you out there who have not yet subscribed, you can put your phone at this. Subscribe to our Gilfix Law YouTube channel. It's growing every day. We're getting tens of thousands of views. Maybe you're watching this on our Gilfix Law channel. If you are, leave a comment, like this video, subscribe. Spread the word, though. We want to share these because we know if you already work with us, you probably know a lot of this, although there's always more we can all learn, right? But if there's anybody in your life who needs to know this, send this to them. Get them. You can use us as the bad guys, I guess you could say, to let them know what they need. For those of you on Instagram, I just launched a professional Instagram channel. It's instagram.com/just my name, Mark Gilfix. So I just launched that. I'm doing 60-second, 30 to 80-second videos with quick legal and planning tips, along with some health tips that I picked up along the way through my incredible and insane journey that I went through over the last few years. So, of course, if you want to contact us, it's easy to find us. We can always review your estate plan. We can be that resource. If you or your loved one faces that diagnosis, we can find us easily at Gilfix and Gilfix.com, 650-493-8070. It's pretty easy to find us online. But I think really importantly, if you already work with us and you face this, come see us right away. We can be that member of your team to help you through it. If you haven't worked with us, or if you don't have an estate plan, we'd love to get the chance to help you. But if you don't work with us, at least please promise me that you'll work with an expert on this. Don't try this at home. And to anybody out there who is facing a serious diagnosis, or just had that, or maybe it's a loved one, you're not alone. You can gain so much wisdom through it, but I know it's hard. And that's why I wanted to share my story. I've been through it. My wife's been through it. Many people I know and love have been through it. I've had so many clients go through these really challenging situations. So I hope this helped to empower you and to understand that there are resources out there. There are steps you can take, and let's control what we can control. Get that team out there. It can be overwhelming, but have that patient advocate there with you at medical meetings. Take a fresh look at your wishes and your dreams and your goals, and let's make sure that your legal plan is up to date and that you are empowering the people who you need to step in for you if and when the time comes. It'd be my privilege and our team at Gilfix and La Poll, our privilege to be a part of that team. But again, just get expert help. And if you haven't subscribed to our Gilfix Law YouTube channel, we have a lot more videos about this. I want to empower you with education and information about all of this. So I'm going to get to some questions. We have some questions that came in. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope my story was useful. It was very emotional for me to revisit a lot of that. But I know I'm not alone. And those of you out there facing this, you're not alone, whether it's a cancer diagnosis, a dementia diagnosis, or other issues. It's something we all face at some point. So let's be prepared and let's control what we can control. Okay, some good questions here. So question from Irene. Okay, Irene, good question. After a couple of updates, to a treatise? Is it a good idea to revoke all previous wills and trusts and start afresh with a new will and trust? So good question. This goes to if you already have an estate plan in place, what's the best way to update it? So whenever we're working with new clients or making updates, we do what we call a restatement of the trust. So we usually will keep the same name of the trust, because revocable trusts, you can update them anytime. That's the standard trust you'd have. We keep the same name. And by doing that, you don't have to retitle assets. When you have a trust, it's really important that your home, and we help our clients with this, that your home is titled in your trust, that your major bank accounts, your non-retirement accounts are titled in the trust. So we usually don't want to create a totally new one and revoke all the old ones. Well, we do revoke. We basically say, hey, we're doing a new version. This replaces all the old versions. You can get rid of them. This new version supersedes all the old ones. So basically, we would almost always do a restatement, which basically is a new trust, but without changing the name, so you don't have to retitle things. So very good question. Whenever we update powers of attorney advanced directives, we just do new versions. We don't really have to revoke old ones. Although if you've given copies of old documents to people and you update them, probably a good idea to let them know, hey, this is no longer valid. And that's why when you update your power of attorney, your advanced directive, give the medical center, give banks copies of those so they know, hey, maybe you gave them an old copy of the old document. You don't want them relying on that. You want them to see the new version. So very straightforward to update it. And a really important thing if you face an issue or if your wishes have changed or if you're worried about tax problems or things like that, we can take a fresh look at everything. So Helga has a really good question. What is a HIPAA waiver? A HIPAA waiver, so HIPAA is the healthcare privacy rule law. It was passed, I think it was the early 2000s. I don't know the exact date, but it added many layers of privacy to medical records. So one thing we see with very old advanced healthcare directives, and even some recent ones that are done improperly, they don't contain HIPAA waiver language. So HIPAA waiver is basically you saying, hey, under the rules of HIPAA, I am waiving my confidentiality and the people I'm naming in this document can look at my medical records. So really important, any advanced healthcare directive that you create should have a HIPAA waiver to explicitly say, not only can these people make decisions for me, but they can also look at my medical records. So make sure that your advanced directive has a HIPAA waiver. We, of course, make sure that's in all of the advanced directives that we create. Good question from Connie. Are there professional patient advocates that one can hire that have medical knowledge that you can name in an advanced healthcare directive? So Connie, that's a really good question. I actually don't know. There are some, so I know some professional fiduciary organizations like Jewish Family and Children's Services. They have a fiduciary department and they actually will serve in someone's advanced healthcare. A lot of professionals will not serve. But I know JFCS, if you name them in your advanced directive, I think they also would have to be named in your financial documents. They will actually serve as a medical decision maker. And I think they have some experts, but that's a really good question. I don't actually know if there are services out there. I would imagine there are. I would look for it, but that's a good question. I'll see if I can find anything in future videos. I'll try to address that. Another question from Helga, good question. So how do we charge for documents? So if we create the trust, the power of attorney, advanced directive, what are our typical fees? So I have to always say as a lawyer, it depends because sometimes situations are much more complicated than others. But the way that we typically do things is while I'm happy to chat with people for like 15 minutes, if you have questions about how we do things, when we have planning meetings, we typically bill hourly for those planning meetings because we want to jump in right away. Our attorney hourly rates range from $495 up to $750 an hour, depending on the level of experience. So that planning meeting is often very efficient. And then from there, we give you flat fees. And once we know your situation, we can give you exact numbers. But if you're creating a trust with us, depending if you're single or married or whatever, the fee for that can be anywhere from $1,900 to $3,500 for your living trust. Really depends. And that includes a lot of other documents with it. Powers of attorney, typically about $475 a person to do really sophisticated ones. Again, that can vary though. If you have more sophisticated issues, maybe it's a little more. If it's simpler, maybe a little less. Advanced directives, typically less than that, under $400 a person. Our fees do change over time. So if you're watching this later, don't necessarily quote me on this, but that's the range. And there are more sophisticated trusts we can add, like if we're doing family protection trust or special needs trust. Those can potentially provide millions of dollars in future value, even if you're not high net worth. And there are a little bit higher fees for those, but we'd go through it with you. We always want you to know after that initial meeting what your costs would be. And we have worked very hard at our firm, Gilfix La Poll, to keep our fees in the realm that we think are approachable for every type of family. If you have kids, if you have any assets, we don't want to price ourselves out of working with everyday families. While we do have ultra high net worth clients, we have many ultra high net worth clients, but we also have everyday hardworking middle class families who we work with. I work with a whole spectrum from CEOs of tech companies to retired teachers. Everything in that realm. Some people don't have much, some people. So talk to us and we can help you through that. We can very efficiently help you. And I can also say doing it right up front, you might spend a little bit more, but doing it right, the stakes are so high, it can save thousands of dollars for your family later. So if things aren't done right, you're stuck in court, you're stuck with tax issues. I didn't even talk about Prop 19 and property tax planning. A lot of people don't even know about that. When you meet with us, we make sure we flag all the issues you should be aware of. We give you options. You don't have to do all the work we say you might want to do, but we want to at least identify the issues that could cost you and your family a lot of money. So good question. Some from Jim. Can a family protection trust be used for nieces, nephews, and grandnephews if you don't have your own children? Yes. Great question, Jim. You can create family protection trusts, dynasty trusts. They don't have to only be for your kids. There are some rules about them being the next generation, but absolutely, we have many clients who've created family protection trusts for nieces, for nephews, sometimes for grandkids. We'd always want to talk that through. But yes, there's flexibility and special needs trusts, by the way, that wasn't in this question. Anybody can create a special needs trust largely for anybody else. So if you have a family friend, you want to help them out and they can't afford to create a special, you can create one for their child, or if it's your niece or your nephew or your grandchild, you can create a special needs trust for them. It doesn't have to only be mom and dad who does that. Another question was from another attendee that they now live in Nevada and Florida, and they're dealing with some issues. Can we help if you don't live in California with your trust? So that usually we'd say if you've moved to another state out of California, we can help you anywhere in California, San Diego to Wairika, anywhere in California, we can help you. If you're watching this and you're in California, Gilfix La Poll can help you, just to be clear. If you're not in California, if you're an existing client, maybe we can talk to you about making updates. We would usually say if you are now living permanently in a different state, maybe it's time to work with someone local there because different rules apply in different states. In California, we have Medi-Cal. Other states have Medicaid when it comes to long-term care issues. So we are happy to chat with you about it and go through it, and we can make a referral to someone in a different state. So sorry for your challenge. I see that there was a diagnosis there. So I give you, healing prayers, and I hope you're okay. Thank you, Helga, for the very nice note. So on that note, again, it was my privilege to get to share my story today. I hope you got something out of it. And I think most importantly, I hope whatever you're going through, you have that team there. And I want to send you personally healing vibes and healing thoughts and hugs if you or your loved ones are going through a tough time. I've been there. I've helped so many clients through it. And that really is part of why I do what I do, the ability to help people in these really tough situations. So I just want to let you know, you're not alone. There are resources there. It is my privilege and my team's privilege to be part of your team. We want to be there for you if and when the time comes. But if there's someone you need to send this to, who needs to see this, send it off. If you're an existing client, let's talk. Whatever. Either way, I hope you got a lot out of this, and I hope everybody is staying safe, sane, and healthy. Let's stay in touch, and let's all try to stay healthy. And if you do face these challenges, again, I want to send you healing vibes and hugs, and hope everybody's staying safe, sane, and healthy. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and stay tuned for many more upcoming seminars and webinars. See you later.